Awesome. So it is now 7 o'clock Eastern time, which means it's time to get this thing going. So for everyone on the call, welcome. Welcome to Carolina. For those who are friends of the community, for all of our current students and alumni, welcome back to the University of South Carolina. My name is Tim Bryson. I'm a class of 2016, and I'm very excited to moderate really this discussion between Julian and myself. As Amber has mentioned, please use the chat function to submit any questions and feedback for the conversation today. I want to be sure that this conversation is a community conversation, so I really want you all's feedback, questions, comments, so we can bring that to the conversation with Julian. But as I said, my name is Tim Bryson, class of 2016. I'm a graduate of the College of Education as an athletic training major. I was involved in several different activities throughout my undergraduate experience, but today is not about me. Today is about our esteemed guest, Julian Williams, who I'm very, very, very excited to speak with on this day. So before we go any further, I want to give you all just a brief bio about our guest today. So Julian R. Williams was appointed as the University of South Carolina's first Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion in June 2020. In this role as the university's Chief Diversity Officer, he leads the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Reporting directly to the President, Julian is responsible for providing vision and leadership for diversity and inclusion efforts across the university. In this role, he capitalizes on the varied ways diversity, equity, and inclusion are and can be embedded in the university's curriculum infrastructure, policies, and programs. So without further ado, I would like y'all to help me welcome Julian Williams. What's up, Julian?
How are you, brother?
Good to see you again, man. Good to see you again.
Absolutely.
I told you last time we talked, I think back in October, like, I got to get you on my podcast.
Yeah, we're going to make it happen.
Black Council beat me to it, man.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great. We'll make it happen. I was looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your resume, but I guess we can get to that a little later. But
we'll definitely bring it up in the conversation, man. Yeah. But before we go any further, man, again, I'd like to ask everyone that I speak with, especially now, just how are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And it's funny because we do a weekly call, myself and the other folks in similar roles as me across the SEC. So all of my peers across the SEC. And we jump on a call every week. And actually this week's call, yesterday's call was on self-care and how we know that not just the work that I do and my peers and counterparts across the SEC lead, but just how us as Black folks, as those in the Black and Brown community are still navigating through today. So I think self-care is always important. You know, I think for me, you know, I like to work out. I'm big on fitness. Can't go to the gym, obviously, due to COVID. So I've sort of constructed my own, you know, gym in the garage with the permission of my wife. So I like to try to get out there and blow off some steam. I'm a gamer, so I play video games, and that's a good way for me to link up with my friends and family across the country. So that's been, you know, that for me has been great. And then obviously just spending time, you know, spending time at home, talking to my wife, my best friend, and just, you know, just that is always a good recharge in this moment for me.
No, most definitely, man. Did you happen to get the PS5 by chance?
I have not. You know, I've been, you know, it's holiday time, so I've been dropping a few hints here and there. But you know what, man, I'm still rocking with my PS4 and doing my thing, and we'll see what happens. See what happens at Christmas.
Nah, glad to hear that, Julian. So as we move forward, again, Randy's saying the same thing. Got to take care of ourselves. Your bio, very abbreviated, which I think speaks to the humility that you serve with, which I think is great. But to provide some context in regards to really who you are, can you just start by telling us, you know, what's your story? How'd you get to South Carolina?
Yeah, thanks so much, man. I mean, I think the humility is something for me that is ingrained because of sort of my start. So I was born in Ypsilanti, Michigan, small, very working class town right next to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the University of Michigan is. And I grew up in, you know, extremely loving family. But my sort of seminal moment for me initially was my father passed away when I was 7 years old. So he had brain cancer, and I went through as the oldest. I have two younger brothers, and you know, it's always funny because my mom did her best to make sure that, you know, folks would always say, "Oh, you're the man of the house now," and that sort of thing. But you know, and she did her best to sort of shield me from taking on sort of the massive responsibilities after my dad's death. But there was a lot that I took on. There was a lot that I think my family needed from me at the moment. And, you know, we grew up in, you know, had a ton of love, but not a lot of money. And it was tough. I remember it was some tough times growing up. But I always sort of remembered a few things. One is education was always so important for my family. And for me as the oldest, I, knew I was going to go to college. I knew that was, but I had no clue how in the world we were going to pay for it.
Yep.
I was like, I remember asking my mom, I think it might have been in 10th grade. I knew I wanted to go to school. I was like, Mom, how are we going to do this? Like, what is that? I know I could probably get in, but how in the world are we going to make this happen? And she told me one thing that I still remember. She said, just keep working hard. And she said, the Lord will do the rest. And she was right. And, for me, my journey, even in my role now, started as an undergraduate at the University of Michigan. It started with a group of Black students in the Black Volunteer Network that were already students at the University of Michigan. But what they did is they came up with a program where they would go to local high schools in the area over MLK weekend and take students to campus for MLK weekend and do programming and go to events. And I remember going there as a 9th grader, as a 10th grader, as an 11th grader. And that was when my eyes opened to what a university experience could look like for me. That was, even though I was 15 minutes down the road from my alma mater, there were times that it seemed like 15 days away because of the difference in terms of how I grew up and where I grew up and what my undergraduate experience was like. But at that moment, to come to campus and see that there was a community for me, to see that there were students that looked like me, to meet students from Detroit and other places that were coming to campus, my decision was made at that moment. So I immediately, upon entering the university, became active, wanted to really give back, but joined the same organization and ended up leading the same organization and others as well. But then as an undergraduate, really felt like, there was a disconnect between the voice and particularly an experience of Black students at the university at the time and the administration. And for myself as a student leader, felt it specifically, as much as I was thankful for the university's stance in terms of being proactive and wanting to recruit students like myself and my peers and colleagues and friends from Detroit. I had some questions about what was my experience like? Did they think about what it was going to be like, a kid from Ypsilanti coming to this university where, my majority peers, they were, these were trust fund kids, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. Some of them had gotten Mercedes Benzes at 15 and 16, and I'm just barely scraping around with a car trying to make it in an undergrad. I worked all throughout undergrad. I worked 3 jobs my senior year, ran 2 organizations. Like, I had to make money. Like, that was because it was so scarce and the resources were so scarce, I had to do it. So, I think that really shapes, that experience shapes how I receive what I hear from our Gamecock community, particularly students and faculty and Gamecocks of color. What I've heard even in 5 and 6 months about sometimes the invisibility that I've heard specifically from Black Gamecocks about what their experience has been like at the University of South Carolina. And that's familiar to me because I remember that. And I also remember this tension very vividly. I remember this tension that I think students of color have with their PWIs, in that I am the proudest Wolverine you will ever meet. And I've come across some of the proudest Black and brown Gamecocks that you would ever meet. But they also have some questions, and they have some critiques, and they have some concerns about that experience. And that I hope that for me, because it's so personal, and I hope that provides me with a unique lens in terms of how I do my job, and then hopefully advocate for those students, faculty, alumni, and community members as well.
I appreciate you sharing that context, Julian, not just because you decided to share that story, he's part of your story with us today, but that provides really the framework for the questions, comments, and critiques that I believe not only I have, but also our community members on this call have as well. And before we go any further, you did say you graduated from Michigan. We won't hold that against you. It's something I told you when you first. I can't. It is Ohio State Michigan week. Y'all copped out, but we're not gonna talk about
player safety is paramount these days. So you gotta. I'm not. Everybody I know is not too mad that they're not playing that game. So
no, I agree. But when you got hired, man, I did tweet at you in June, and I said, "Yo, I'm not gonna hold Michigan against you, but it's very glad you're here, right? Very, very glad you're here." Yeah. And one thing that stuck with me back in June, you remain committed to your word your purpose in this role is that, in that moment I felt seen, right? I felt seen, I felt acknowledged, I felt heard because you responded back to my tweet. And I think, again, that sounds mind blowing, especially for a millennial, not just a millennial educator, but a millennial on social media. But you've done a really good job, not just being visible, but also helping sure that our community members, our Black and Brown community members, feel seen, heard, and welcome. During my undergraduate
Thank you.
experience, something that you mentioned. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you. I appreciate that too.
Most definitely. So during my undergraduate experience, you kind of alluded to it. Not just myself, but people like Carly Wells immediately comes to mind. We felt like we were the vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion, right? The school kept coming to us asking, what should we do? What are Black and Brown students feeling? How can we help? Right. But 4 years, 5 years later, they finally hired someone, the first vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to serve in this role. So talk to us more, like, what does a VP for DEI do?
Yeah, I mean, it's every day is different, but I think that, from the way that I endeavor to lead the work that I lead, is collaborative. Like, you have to think about what this looks like collaboratively. So there's obviously areas that are under my authority, but a lot of what I have to do is to connect with folks. So because I can't go in and tell people, how I think they should be doing things, or this is how you should be doing hiring or outreach and support for students. So what you have to do is try to lead them in a different way, is to connect with them in a number of different ways, to make sure that they understand sort of what a value add looks like in the space, to make sure that they understand how the services that they offer, for example, connect or affect students, make sure that they understand sort of what sometimes doesn't come to light in terms of student experience and student voice in that way, as we talk about students. The other thing that I'm endeavoring to do is then we have to build infrastructure. Yeah. That leading this work requires resources, it requires staffing, it requires people. And a good part of sort of my first 5 and 6 months has really been thinking about how we build a world-class infrastructure around diversity, equity, and inclusion here at the University of South Carolina. In my opinion, regardless of whatever metric you use, you can't show me a preeminent university that hasn't prioritized this. You can't show, I would argue that if you show me a company, even if we're taking it into a corporate context, a company that can't claim that they're the best at anything until they have endeavored and made investments and strides in terms of what it looks like inclusively for its workforce and all of those things. So it's going to be then about raising the level of accountability for me, building infrastructure, connecting with folks across the board, and then understanding sort of where I think the imperative is around diversity, because this is no longer optional for higher education. It is no longer nice to have. In terms of having a muscle memory and a capacity around creating an inclusive community, it's an imperative. It is past time. As we think about what we do as an industry, we have to, and I think for us at the University of South Carolina, we have some catching up to do, and we have to do it relatively fast. Like it's that serious. And I think the expectations of our community are adding to that as well. And so I'm happy to shepherd that forward, to be a voice, and to try to be as authentic as I can in that work that I lead as well.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned, right? It feels as if we have a lot of catching up to do, whether that's as it relates to the current status is higher education, whether it relates to university, but also state history. And so you have gone on this listening tour, something I know we talked about before, over the last 6 months. What have been some of the challenges, critiques, concerns, questions that stakeholders, both internal and external, have raised in this listening tour?
That's great. I mean, that's a great question. I think folks want to know if we're serious about this. True. Like, I think that there is there's a ton of optimism, and I think with a new president, provost, myself, and energy, I think a renewed or new energy around these institutional commitments, people are excited. But also, in this time, you have to, approach things a little skeptically as well. As like, okay, is this serious? Are we? Because I think people have seen stops and starts before, whether it's here at the university or whether it's more broadly. They've seen where maybe we've talked a better game than we've actually delivered. They've seen where, there's a plan. We put a plan in place, and a plan is just that until you actually act on it. It's just a plan. So I think that, one of the things that I've heard particularly is okay, what are we going to be doing? How are we going to be investing in infrastructure? How do we change folks day to day? And I think that's the other piece. I had a chance a couple of days ago, I saw on Monday, to talk and meet with the African American Studies faculty. And boy, when I tell you, that is an incredible group of faculty members right there. I had to take a moment because I'm an English major and a political science major, and to sit on a call with Nikki Finney and Todd Shaw and those fun there, like, and I'm sitting there trying not to go back into sort of undergrad mode.
Yeah.
And again, but so we know we have a world-class African American Studies program. But with the questions that those faculty, for example, are asking is, okay, where are the resources?
Yep.
How do we take the words, and how do we change our day-to-day in terms of how we're positioned at the university? For example, we know that we have aspirations and goals to increase Black enrollment at the University of South Carolina on undergraduate and graduate side. But what we know is, as you and I both know, is Black students, when they get to an institution, they want to take classes and courses from Black professors. So how do we, we have to nurture and support the world-class scholars that we have, and connect them and utilize them to make sure that they're operating at sort of maximum capacity, efficiency, making sure that they feel affirmed as well. So I think folks at this moment are really trying to want to know sort of what we're doing beyond words. And my hope is that people will continue to hold us accountable, and then I can continue to report back on some of the positive and proactive steps that we are taking in the space.
That's well said. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques that you want to share today, please put it in the chat. We want to make sure, again, this is a community conversation that we're having on tonight. But Julian, I know you got the offer at least to come to South Carolina prior to June 2nd, which I refer to as Black Square Day on Instagram, but also around the time of the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, many others. And since then, there have been a proliferation of senior diversity, equity, and inclusion officers in all industries, but definitely in higher education as well. There's been a really immediate focus on education, right? Education, as well as discipline. Two things that you speak about a lot in many of the opportunities you have when you're engaging with others. But what are some of the things that you are doing right now to create lasting and sustainable change as it relates to equity and racial justice?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we got this done pretty quickly, but I'm really proud of, and this was once again collaboratively with our vice president for research, for example. So we know that we had those faculty members that I talked about. They and faculty members across the board sort of run on grant funding. Like, how do we, that's something that is looked at when you're coming up for tenure. It's looked at as you are being reviewed. Is okay, what projects are you working on? What research are you doing? And how are you bringing in grants that eventually help fuel the university? But what we wanted to do, and is what other institutions have thought about, is how do we center and incentivize our faculty, particularly that are doing work around race, racial justice, social justice, and racial equity, and provide grant funding specifically for those types of interdisciplinary research projects or conferences and those sorts of things, and let our faculty know that, like, hey, we see you as experts. We know that higher education in general has never met a problem that it didn't feel like it could solve. We've helped to put people in space, especially higher research, Carnegie One, Research One institutions like the University of South Carolina, putting people into space, working on cures for COVID right now. So you're not going to tell me that the ideals and situations around racial justice and racial inequities that we can't fix, that those are too big for higher ed and students and faculty members to put their collective knowledge and wisdom towards figuring out some creative solutions. So myself and our vice president for research, Prakash Nagarkati, came together with a couple of our faculty members, one in the College of Education, Michelle Bryan, and the other in the College of Social Work, Dr. Kirk Foster, and put together what we've entitled the Racial Justice and Equity Research Fund, which is providing research grants from $5,000 up to $15,000 to our faculty members at the University of South Carolina that are doing work and centering work around racial justice and racial equity. And it's started, it's only 6 months in, but it started with 5 grants. Now the last round that's coming up, I think Prakash told me that we're going to end up giving out about $164,000 in grants. And these are top quality interdisciplinary projects. I mean, we've got that. So and I'm excited about that, because what that will do for us is for us at the University of South Carolina, there's a thought leadership responsibility that we have to play in this moment. And what better way to put forward thought leadership than highlighting your faculty and incentivizing them to continue on to do those research as well. So that's one thing, Tim. There's others that I can talk about, but I think that's one thing as I think about in 5-6 months that I'm proud of, and also proud to see how we can grow that, and even maybe think about soliciting, whether it be advancement funding or even partnering with either other universities or corporations to help facilitate that type of research and make that type of difference in the world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know there's people on the call that's probably saying, Julian, that's great. Faculty, we're finally excited someone's looking at faculty, looking at academic affairs. But what about athletics and what about student affairs?
Yeah.
So talk to us more about some of the connection and collaborations you made, with units within those 2 areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can start with student affairs, because I think there is a natural, just a natural synergy and in terms of my work and around equity and diversity, and what student affairs is responsible for doing, which is essentially creating an environment for students, leading them through whether it be co-curricular or residential experience as well. And I've really enjoyed the partnership that I've made and had with folks like Shay Malone and Anna Edwards and others on a number of fronts. And I think where I would like, where one of the things I've talked with student affairs really on is how are we then prioritizing the professional development that we know is necessary to do this work well. How do we, and I think sometimes and I heard this a little bit even when I first got here, sometimes there's a reticence to talk through what we know to be true, is that the experience of first generation Black and brown students at the University of South Carolina is going to be different and drastically different in ways than second, third, fourth generation Gamecocks from a different socioeconomic background. And I think sometimes we were scared to talk about that, but it's like until or unless we, one, learn about it, and two, talk about it, then how in the world are we going to be able to provide services to those students? I think sometimes we think it's like, oh, well, so we just open our doors up, and then we'll just serve whoever comes here. But one of the things that I've been always talking with student affairs about is, are we benchmarking who's utilizing some of the services that we offer? And if we have the technology, how are we taking advantage of that? And if that information is showing us, for example, that we know that there are students that aren't utilizing sort of pre-professional advising or the Career Center, then we need to be doing extremely intentional outreach there. We need to be thinking critically about what our offices look like, because I had to say on a call, as well, and sort of harkening back to even my own experience, when I'm the only Black student in a class, when I have to go to work on campus, navigating what we know to be life at a predominantly white institution in a Black body, I'm going to be reticent at the end of the day then to walk into and to sort of voluntarily go into whether it be an office, whatever services that office provides. I may not utilize that just because I might be drained in that moment. And it may not be it might not be the fault of any of the folks that are in that office, but we have to make sure that we understand sort of what we're reflecting outward. And I think we've had to do an extremely intentional job to make sure that our offices are reflective of the student community that we serve. And then in athletics, I was on a call. I spoke with Maria Hickman, who's the Chief Diversity Officer for Gamecock Athletics today. She and I check in very regularly. Have worked really closely. Got a chance to talk to the football team earlier this summer and meet them, some of the coaching staff. So I think that as we think about athletics as the sort of, they call it the front door or the front porch to the university, we know that is a space, especially as we think about these issues of racial justice and racial equity, that a space where I look forward to continuing to make those connections as well.
Yeah, selfishly, I'm super excited about your collaborations over with the athletics department. But there was a question that came up from basically a lot of what you just shared just now. And the question says, how do you hold people, and I would assume, units on campus accountable to changing these systems that are either racist, unjust, et cetera. She has heard, or they have heard that other schools, colleges, and universities, that they're putting these requirements within their performance evaluations.
Yes.
Is that something that's being considered in South Carolina right now?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think and it's because, and mind you, so this is where the collaborativeness comes in. If I had the ability to just come in and tell folks how I think we should do it, the job would be a lot easier. But you have to a lot of times help people see the value. But the way that I talk about something like that is that we hold people, and especially in higher ed, we judge ourselves and hold people accountable for a ton of metrics that we think are important. If I'm running my office into the red every year, spending every penny and more that I've been allocated, I'm going to have a call, or somebody's going to knock on my door from our finance and administration office and say, Julian, what in the world are you doing? As we benchmark ourselves around student success, around fiscal and financial metrics, around class enrollments, around all of these things. So then we've got to in my opinion, if we say this is important to us, we have to then endeavor to hold ourselves accountable for what we're doing from an inclusion and equity perspective. Hold ourselves accountable now, and then devote time, energy, and resources to professional development in the space as well. So it should be tied to our performance evaluations and looking into that. But then also it can't just be, okay, we're going to do our 2 days of professional development and, we'll talk about diversity for a half hour and just get on to other stuff. Like, no, we've got to figure out how to weave this foundationally onto everything we do, because it is baked into everything we do. It is, when we think about the multitude of students that we serve, and then the growing diversity of the student body that we've sort of benchmarked in our strategic plan, it's got to come from all of those angles as well. And I think that's the part that it's personal for me around my work, because sometimes people think is like, oh, well, how do we know? And they try to make sometimes DEI work, folks will, extremely squishy, that you can't measure it. You don't know when you got it. So why even sort of benchmark it? And it's like, no, we benchmark and measure everything else. So in my opinion, the same way we would have a conversation with a supervisor that's running his office or her office into the red. If they're doing that, running their office into the red around retention and hiring of employees or persons of color, that should be also a conversation. Those should be benchmarks as well. And then layering on the professional development that's necessary to creating an inclusive, diverse, and equitable workplace as well.
So when you were saying that, Julian, I mean, honestly, the things that you shared so far, right, that your office is doing a lot of work, and I'll get to some of the roadblocks you may have encountered, some of the hurdles you had to, jump up to this point. But a lot of the burden on education, right, on this professional development, naturally seems to either fall at your desk or in your office.
Yeah.
But more importantly, right, it also falls on Black and brown students, undergrad and grad, to educate their peers, to be the ones leading, talking about their experiences so people can learn from it. So what have been the conversations around, empowering other people to also do this work on their own?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I said this on a panel. I was speaking, the three chambers of commerce did a panel around DEI, and I was on, and I really enjoyed. But one of the things that I told folks is I'm no longer recommending books. Like, I won't do that. I won't recommend a book for you. I just won't do that. Not because I don't want to, or I won't, I don't want to see people read and educate themselves, but we just can't do it now I'm in the mode of telling folks that we got to do our own homework here. Like, we can't, the same way we teach our elementary school students that we can't look off somebody else's test and everybody has to do their own homework. There's a ton of DEI, anti-racist reading lists out there, a ton of them. It takes one quick Google search and you can find all the books that you need. So I'm consistently advocating that people have to do their own work and do their own homework. And I think even for folks in the majority and white folks as well, there's work for you to do there as well. Even if it's just using your space and your voice as an ally, even if it's just opening up space for somebody else that looks different from you in your organization, your day-to-day, your workforce, or at the university as well. So, I think you're right. And I think some of that is even with me is trying to let folks know is like, hey, just because Julian's here doesn't mean all these problems go away. If anything, I can't come in and fix it for you. Like what I will always do is to partner, to walk alongside, to endeavor to work and to put together a plan. But that plan has to ultimately be executed by the individuals in those units. And I think people understand that. So I've had a couple of conversations with our IT department, for example, and our vice president there, Doug Foster, for example. And he's like, Julian, we know that there's a problem in DOIT. We really struggle to recruit, and working with them on a plan. Now I can't come in and do it all for them, and nor have I been asked. But I think it's that for me is how do we put people on a plan to learn and to do their own homework as well. And I think that's what I've really tried to emphasize as well.
I got a story about that in just a second. There was a question that came in asking, does your office have the resources, both human and financial, to be successful and change agents at all 8 Carolina campuses?
Yeah, so I think my direct responsibility is for the Columbia campus, but as I do add a team and build out the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I do want to connect with all the folks at our satellite campuses, and even if it's just everybody coming together on a monthly or bi-monthly basis that are leading diversity, equity, and inclusion work across the campus. Let's share ideas. Let's figure out what's work. How can we help each other? I think that's tremendously effective and can be helpful for us as a system. So that's one thing. I think the other piece on the resource front is, we have a new and bold and one of the boldest strategic plans that I've seen, which does have some resource allocations to them that I am utilizing tremendously to start that initial staffing for my office. But it can't just end there. And I think that the resources, especially in this fiscal climate, is going to be, we have to invest in. I think that's what we have to do. I do feel like I have the resources at my disposal at the moment, but at some point, there's going to need to be more investment into what our infrastructure looks like to get us to, because I think from a resource perspective, we're just building out, building out an office that likely should have been in place years ago, but we're getting to it. We're on it now. But at some point, if we want a world-class infrastructure, if we want to lead in this space, which I really and honestly truly believe that the University of South Carolina can, then we have to continue to look at what those investments are. And then lastly, I'll close. One of the things that I look forward to doing is then partnering with our new vice president for advancement on sort of what this looks like from a foundational perspective. And I think that's one place where I think the Black Alumni Chapter plays a key role, because in my opinion, we've left tons of money off the table because we have not prioritized Black dollars from the alumni community. I've met a ton of Black Gamecock alums that are doing amazing things. And I don't think that we have a cohesive or prioritized strategy towards engaging those folks, letting them know what's happening, letting them know how they can get in touch with students, and then how they can then invest back in their alma mater as well. And we have to learn how to speak. You have to speak to your audiences differently. And I think we have to get some muscle memory there very fast and very quickly as well.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And that's a great segue into the Richard T. Greener Scholarship. So for those who have given, thank you. If you're able to give again, please do so. For those who have not given, whether you're a Carolina alum, current student or not, please consider giving to the Richard T. Greener Scholarship. This money goes directly to supporting Black students at our esteemed and world-class university. Simone or Amber, if y'all could put the link to the scholarship in the chat for people to view, that would be awesome. Thank you, Amber. Julian, I want to pivot because you mentioned again, I was involved in a lot of different things in undergrad, honestly, half of which I forget. But one of my favorite experiences was working over in campus recreation. And there has been, I can't tell you, how much conversation, both online, I'm sure in the meetings that you sit in, conversation on the renaming of buildings. And so I know you sit on the Presidential Commission on University History. That website is very robust, actually, with the agenda and the meeting notes. So I definitely appreciate the transparency. But can you talk to us more about the status, at least, of the renaming of Strom Thurmond Rec Center to begin with?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll sort of start, I'll sort of take a step back, and I think what the conversation that we're having at the University of South Carolina and the work that's being engaged in around, essentially, it's historical research. It's around a reconciliation of our history. It's also around sort of trying to sort of do some research and problematize whether or not the individuals that are adorned on our buildings, whether or not the legacies of those individuals reflect our values. And I think it helps not to look at this work just in a vacuum for U of SC, because if you think about whether it's municipalities, colleges and universities across the country, professional sports teams, even in my former residence in the DMV area where you are, Tim. There are tons of entities that are undertaking this work, and it's our turn at the University of South Carolina, in my opinion. Two things are happening. One is continual, in that we will have to continually study our history, continually figure out how we can recognize the uncompensated and unrecognized labor, particularly of Black and African Americans and enslaved individuals, into the building and construction and of our campus, into the expansion of the university's footprint in downtown Columbia, for example, and the impact that that had on areas like Ward 1 and what were thriving Black neighborhoods. Like, we have to reckon with that and reconcile that and continually study that. That is a continual history. And with that is the work around naming, as that you mentioned. So what I'll say is that the commission, Presidential Commission on University History, is separated out into a ton of different subcommittees, and one of those committees is the Names on Landscape subcommittee, which is utilizing and undertaking that work. It's important work because it is historical, and we have a group of faculty members that are leading the study into the history. We just finished voting on a list of criteria, which all of the names of those individuals and their history and what can be uncovered. They're holding listening sessions. All of that is going to be put up against the criteria that will be making its way to the website as well, which is just approved. And then we've got some real and honest and true decisions to make as a university, because when I hear from our students, when I hear from our alumni, when I hear from folks that are connected to our community, that there is true incongruence in some of these names and legacies into who we are, that is real to me. Like, that matters to me. When I think about my grandmother, for example, who was born and raised in segregated Birmingham, Alabama, and the fact that segregation made her life harder at almost every point. And folks are coming to me and saying that there's an incongruence into the names that are adorning some of our buildings and who we are saying and endeavoring to be as a university. That makes sense. So I think for us, we have to center those voices, and sometimes I think we will have to center the voices that we haven't always centered as a university as well. So more to come. That commission is sort of moving on its work relatively fast. Hopes to have an interim report to the president with recommendations at some point early next semester as well. It's chaired by Dr. Val Littlefield and Harris Pastides and Elizabeth West in the libraries. And then I think the voice of this community, particularly our Black Alumni Council and alums in general, are going to be key in some of those next decisions as well.
That's awesome. I appreciate you, providing some more context on that commission. I think that helps all of us learn more about what, but also why and where we're going. But with that, another one of my experiences was in the athletic department. I was an athletic training student for several different teams, including the football team, softball team, and our national championship winning women's basketball team. And this year, really since Colin Kaepernick, to be honest, this conversation about what to do during the national anthem. Do we kneel? Do we stand? Do we stay in the locker room? Do we hand over the heart, we lock arms. A lot of conversation about it.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of conversation, particularly around the women's basketball program and their decision to kneel during the national anthem. Now, before I have two questions, but the first question, can you just provide a little bit more context on what has happened, what conversations have been happening, on campus right now as it relates to different student athletes' decisions to kneel during the national anthem?
Yeah, I mean, I think about when I started in June, and one of the first things I is like pulling together our leadership team to say, hey, we're going to need to talk. We're going to need to talk about this because, like, this is it's we can stick our heads in the sand and hope, cross our fingers that nothing happens. But what we know, and this is I was in the before I left Washington D.C. was in the protests this summer, and what I saw was college students. Like, there was just a ton of young people in the streets, and I was like, these kids, I don't know where they go to school, but they go to school somewhere. And you can bet that when school starts back up, that energy will come with them. Not to mention what we know, what was happening in the professional sports ranks, what we know is happening as well. And this is, I always try to get us a center that this isn't new. If you think about the history of social movements, even the last civil rights movement in this country and SNCC, those are college students. Like, college students have always been at the forefront of this country, particularly Black college students, at the forefront of the march towards justice and equality and civil rights. So we should not be surprised that our students are going to figure out a way to utilize their platforms and to have a voice. We saw that with our football team this summer on a number of occasions. We saw that with our women's volleyball teams, women's soccer team, and we're seeing that same thing come forward with our women's basketball team as well. So I think a couple of things always happen in this moment, Tim, and I always try to provide context and an additional context from there. Is a few things. One is, we know that there is no such thing as a perfect protest. We also know that, especially when it is Black or brown folks protesting. We know that especially when the protest is advocating for civil rights and equality for Black and brown folks, that is almost a given that it won't be sort of openly received. If you look at even the Gallup polls in the 1960s around the sit-ins, the nonviolent sit-ins, marches, and counter protests, almost a large majority of folks said this is too much. It's too radical. It's too much. It's not the right message. It's not the right not the right way. So in that context, we know that for us as a university, especially a state university, is we have to create the environment that allows our students and student athletes to use their voice. We have to do that. And I know from talking with our president that he is 100% supportive of our athletes utilizing their voices to be heard on issues that they care about. I think where we still have some work to do is to understand the why. And I think that's the most important piece here, is to leave our ears open to truly and honestly understand and hear the why. And if you think about our Gamecocks, our Lady Gamecocks, the statement that they put out as to the why was extremely, in my opinion, articulate. You could tell that they had thought about this. Now, whether folks agree with it or not, whether they agree with it, it's the time or the manner, or whether it distracts from the larger conversation that they're trying to have, I think we can be open to that conversation. But you can't, in my opinion, we have to try to hear and understand more of the why. And I think that's, if we take one lesson away from even the NFL as they navigated through this issue, 4 years too late, Roger Goodell's coming forward and saying, man, we should have listened to Colin Kaepernick. We knew it wasn't about the flag. We knew that this wasn't an anti-military protest. And in my opinion, we need to be having those same types of conversations for us at the university. How do we open up dialogue? How do we understand more about the why behind some of these protests? And then I think we also have to understand that we're asking our student athletes to lead. And what we know is that leaders don't always show up in moments that are convenient, that leaders are going to show up in moments where it may not be convenient. It may not be the most convenient time, or it might cause some unease or some discomfort. And I think for us as a robust public university that represents so many different communities, I think we've got to really open ourselves up to have those really tough conversations about that as well.
No, you're exactly right. And I think to your point earlier, right, when students or student athlete and student athletes for that matter are making their decision to protest, whatever that looks like for them, they're getting a lot of pushback, feedback, negativity, hatred. I mean, all the above, right? And they go straight to Julian Williams' office and say, what you gonna do about it? But I'm gonna flip that and really put the onus back on us as alums, especially. What can alums do to best show not just support, but also allyship and advocacy for not just the women's basketball team, but also any other student and student athlete who decides to protest?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, Tim. I think that there's a role that our alumni association, our alums, our Black Alumni Council has to play in holding us all accountable as a university and as university leaders to be sort of truly affirming and supportive of all of our students. So I think, in these situations, you are going to hear from a subset of folks that are that feel a certain way. And I'm not saying that they don't have the right to feel like that, but, I think that it also helps to know, and I think it would probably help others to know that there are individuals out there that, that want our community to know that we do support their right to protest. And I think, as I've been in, exchanging text messages back and forth with Coach Daly, it's been that exact same thing. As we know that we have a head women's basketball coach that is the most senior Black woman on our campus. So she has a role to play, one of the most visible Black people on our campus in general. So the role that she has taken on in leading her team through this moment is one that I reached out to her and let her know, and I thanked her because, I think that we have a responsibility to help our students learn through this moment. And you could tell that she was helping, in her way, in the conversations that she was having with students, is helping them sort of learn through this moment and to sort of fully understand and grapple with it as well. And for me, anyone that's standing up for justice and equity and trying to raise attention to it, I think we need our students to care. We need more of the community to care. And then we need to be having some dialogue around the underlying issues here and the why around the protests that we're seeing as well.
Most definitely. So you mentioned processes and systems earlier. I mean, we see a question in the chat now from John. He asked, do you recommend someone coming straight to you with certain issues on campus, or is there a chain of command?
Yeah, I mean, folks can reach out obviously directly to me. Like I would encourage that. If one of the things that I've enjoyed over these past 6 months is just hearing from folks. Like we've got just a ton of individuals, especially alumni and community members and students. They care about this university, and because they care that they reach out. Like, because in my opinion, somebody that doesn't care, that is totally disconnected, you just won't hear from. So, if there's somebody that wants to, talk or reach out or share any information, they can obviously reach out directly to me. I can share my my email address in the chat, and then we can sort of go from there. But obviously, they can feel free to do that. Now, if it's not an issue that falls directly under my area, I would then try to connect them with somebody else on campus. But obviously, would want to try to hear from them first to figure out what we might be able to do.
Awesome. So this work is not easy. I don't think anyone would say this work is easy. It's very challenging, but also very rewarding, but honestly rooted in justice. But 6 months into your role, right, what are some of the things we can celebrate on this call today in regards to some of the wins you've had over the last 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I have been just really heartened by is the community that we have. There's a special, this is a special university. it is one that this is a special place, and I am excited about just the caliber of our students and faculty, but also our goals and aspirations as it relates to becoming more accessible. I think we've got to serve this state better and differently, and that's not just us. That's higher education in general, because I think one of the things I always try to, and you and I've talked about this, Tim, but
Mhm.
you know, as I study higher education, our future lies in accessibility, our future lies in how we can prepare students to enrich their lives. We know that that a degree, particularly a University of South Carolina degree, is a game changer. It can
Mhm.
change lives and trajectories. We are all products of what that looks like. So how do we expand that, and how do we expand that responsibility? I think one of the things I'm proud of is that we have a leader and a president that is committed to that, a president that is committed to serving the state and serving the individuals in this state in a different way. And I'm excited about that. And then also then connecting with our HBCUs in a genuine way, in a way that's mutually beneficial. So how we can reach out to Benedict and Claflin and South Carolina State and others in a way that respects the role that they've undertaken his presently, previously, and historically in educating the African American community in general. And that role is important. But then how do we supplement that as a flagship university, where, in my opinion, we have a responsibility there as well? So I think I would want folks to know and understand that there's an energy around the work that we're talking about, and that I'm excited to see what form that takes over the next few years for us at the University of South Carolina.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So those are some of the wins we've had. What are some of the challenges, roadblocks, hurdles we're gonna have to jump these next few months?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's undertaking and understanding that that our goals, aspirations, objectives around diversity, equity, and inclusion are 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 going to be viewed in even in those situations that we talked about as relates to whether it's how we respond to protests, how we respond to our students, that there's an interconnectedness here. I think sometimes we think that they are disconnected, but they're not. They're going to be viewed interconnectedly. I think we have to understand that our history can be our history and our legacies can be a point that we can that we can sort of leverage to say, yes, an institution that was partially built by enslaved labor should be the ones that are leading the pack, in my opinion, in terms of creating an equitable environment. But you have to want to do that.
Yep.
You have to see that as important and as interconnected. I believe that that puts us at a better position place to be able to do, because we have to wrestle with this every day,
Mhm.
just walking through the horseshoe. So if we're able to do that and put that energy into play, then I think that will then make us the leader in the space that we can be. But we have to want to do
I
those
want it.
things, and I think that's the important piece. And I think we also have to really see ourselves in a civil rights movement. And you know, it's very easy to politicize, and it's been done, politicize where we are, and that's happened, and that's sort of pushed people away. But we are in a civil rights movement, and I think what better role in that as institution of higher education to play and walk alongside our community, our students and faculty in that as well. So we have to. These are will issues, in my opinion. Now there are there's resource pieces to this, but I see them more as will issues in terms of the challenges that are ahead for us. I do believe that we have the institutional will to overcome those challenges, but it will not be easy. And I think geographically, I'm under no illusions that leading inclusion and diversity work in South Carolina was going to be just come down and just be the easiest thing. Like, I came down, my wife and I knew that this would be one of the larger challenges in my young career that I would take on. But I'm excited about it. And a lot of my excitement comes because of the people that I work with,
Sure.
my peers and colleagues, and then our students and faculty and our alums. Like, it's that energy that keeps me motivated, that keeps me excited and energized to lead this work.
It's amazing, Julian. So I'm gonna do another call for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to use the Q&A function as well. And as we wait for some of the questions to jump in, I've been firing questions at you, Julian, all night. So I want to at least give you the opportunity. If you do have any questions for me or for the alumni, I'm happy to answer that right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, Tim, about what do you all need from us as a university, from me? I think conversations like this are key. I have to thank our particularly our Black Alumni Council for the consistent outreach, invitations to events, and all of those things that's allowed me to connect with the community in a great way, even in this short time, especially in this digital medium that we're operating in. But just sort of curious on what else, as you all are getting together and talking and reminiscing and talking about, what else do you want to see from your university in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question, Amber. So have you got on Shane Beamer's calendar yet? I asked that first before.
I think Coach is, he's he's a little busy, but I am sure that I will get a chance to meet with him. I did get a chance to meet with the previous coaching staff, even when I got here this summer, and look forward to working with Maria and our team to meet with this incoming team as well. And excited about the coaching change and the opportunity there. And my wife and I went to a few games this year, and we enjoyed ourselves. We only won one of them, but we were excited. It was fun.
I like Michigan, but I'll be quiet for a minute. So I had to do it. It was there. But to answer your question,
please go back.
I think the biggest thing, right, is us figuring out how we can be more visible to the students.
Yep.
I work in career development at Maryland, and we talk about this a lot. And there's a lot of focus, not just in athletics, but really at in higher education on graduation, right? Retention, graduation. Where's this first destination piece at? Like, where's the career placement? Where's career fulfillment? And how can we raise the ceiling to prioritize that as a metric that I think would then incorporate not just diversity, but also equity, inclusion, and justice as we look to prepare our Black, or at least our non-white students, to pursue their evolving career goals.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it's really becoming more visible in places where we had not been visible before, being more connected and collaborative. And of course, this conversation, as well as the one back in September with Provost Tate, Rick Wade, is also a step in the right direction. But looking in the spring semester, right? I know Amber's going to lead our next session, but which organizations or which units on campus have we not tapped into yet, where we can become more visible? So you mentioned your relationship with Don Staley. I think athletics is a huge population of Black students, right?
Absolutely.
Black and brown students that we can be more integrated with, to ensure that they're having not just a great experience, but also can pursue their evolving career goals, free from, racism, hatred, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'm happy to strategize with you all, Tim, and I know that our alumni association is really taking this work on. I think as we think about the benefits of just the Greener Scholarship, for example, and I wanted to make sure that I get it, because I did not want Chanel or anybody else on me. Like, I wanted to make sure, but those are easy things to give to because they have an impact. And I think one of the you asked about sort of conversations and units that I've been working with. One of them is, I had a number of conversations with development, because we know it takes money to run a university. And I also know that there are causes and things that we can connect with in a different way, whether it's engaging our alumni community differently, particularly our Black alumni community, whether it's involvement there, whether it's asking, and I know they have some ideas on doing some more survey work, some focus groups, and all those things are truly 100% necessary. And we've got to talk to them, because I think, I was having this conversation with Will and with Wes as well, as like, if my alma mater, and they did, but after George Floyd died, if I got a solicitation for money from the University of Michigan, and it didn't mention what was happening, what was affecting a majority, not just the alums of color, but current students, majority, everybody. If it didn't mention that, or it didn't talk about it, or understand, or was that's almost malpractice. Like, we've got to be comfortable enough in understanding how we need to address our audiences in real time, in real ways that are authentic and affirming and that matter. So, I think for us, I think there's a ton of opportunity to do some of that engagement that you're talking about, and then create that level of visibility that you're talking about, Tim.
That's awesome. So there are no questions in the chat. So I'm gonna have 2 more questions to close the night out with us.
Yeah.
One thing, I'm gonna get you on the pod too, but I'm big on millennial culture right now. You are definitely a millennial in how you choose to lead. And one thing that you had in your Twitter bio is unapologetically Black. And to this point, I have yet to see not just another chief diversity officer, vice president for diversity, equity, inclusion, but any other higher education administrator that has unapologetically Black in their Twitter bio. Why do you lead the way that you do? Like, where does this come from? Where does philosophy stem from? Talk to us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so one of the things that I love about my role is I get to show up Black every day. So
Yeah.
I've always, as going to 2 PWIs and then immediately finishing law school and joining private practice as an attorney, I had just gotten used to and accepted that there was going to be parts of my culture, my heritage, and who I am. And I would just have to leave at home somewhere, and I pick it up when I walk through the door. But one of the things that I enjoy, and that some of it is I get to bring more of myself to work every day. Now, some of that it has to be intentional because I'm not sure how all of that is received. But at this point, I just it matters so much to me because I think these are advantages for us as Black folks that we don't always get. We're always taught, especially those that are coming to college, you act a certain way, don't dress like this, cut your hair, shave your, shave your face, all and I have the privilege of male privilege, so I don't even have to, walking in the shoes of a Black or brown woman in the space is even more. It's a conversation that I have with my wife about what her professional journey is like, pale in comparison. So it has to be something that we hold on to. I will not apologize for who I am and who I'm going to advocate for. What I know is that there is the energy comes, and the reason self-care becomes important. And I was having this conversation with some colleagues just last week. Is my role requires a vulnerability that a lot of folks don't have to give. You don't have to come in and expose so much, sort of either personally or sort of internally. But I know that is going to help move this work forward and move this university forward, because a lot of times it's going to be, what'll happen is you plant the seed, and hopefully, the folks will sort of run with it, germinate it, and let it grow. So, I think, for me, it comes with being just proud of my people, like being really proud of my people, being excited about, I think, the opportunity that we have as a country to hopefully finally leverage what the American dream truly looks like, and make sure that it does apply to folks like you and I. And then we had a conversation at our senior team level, and we were reading the book Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I was honest with my team and my colleagues, and I said, look, like I am a vice president of this university. I've got 2 degrees. And by all sort of outward appearances, I should be safe from the things that we know Black men go through on a day-to-day basis. But I had to let them, I'm not. And that's the real thing. And I heard from folks afterwards that they thanked me for being that honest and authentic. And I think my hope is that conversation, for example, will plant a seed that helps us be better as a university. So I have to show up the way I show up. And, I know every job isn't for me, which is why you don't take every job. But I did, you and I sort of talked about that. But, in my conversation, I remember vividly with President Kaslan, I asked him, we're sitting on his couch in my office during my interview. And I said, is change possible here? Because if it's not, I'm going to stay where I am. I'm happy up in Northern Virginia, and another opportunity will come along. And he said, no, change is possible here. Now, it won't be easy, but it is possible. And I never had an easy journey my entire life, so I wouldn't have it any other way. But I feel like the well-earned, hard-fought progress and journeys are the ones that lead the most, lead to the most opportunities in the end.
Yeah, Julian, again, I'm glad you had that in your bio, because you also, you not just liberate, current students to live, to breathe in their Blackness, but also alumni as well, including myself. So I want to say thank you
Thank
yet
you.
again for doing so, but also leading in this way. But I'm also pretty unapologetic. If you ask my coworkers, shout out to Reese and Megan, I think are on the call today. And I'm sure 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we'll be celebrating the fact that my beard is probably connected. Looks like yours.
You just got to give us some time, bro.
I'm
This
gonna
is
give it some time. I'm gonna give it
go
some time.
Joe oil and
Hey, it'll come. I'll hit you up after the call is over. But 20 years from now, man, what will we be celebrating as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion at the University of South Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, so I am a product of an intentional effort from my alma mater to reach out to students that they didn't necessarily have to reach out to. So if I can be, for example, one of the things, if I can be a conduit for Black South Carolinians or Black students in general to this university and through this university in some way, my office, through my work, advocacy, whatever that looks like, I hope that will be I hope that and you don't celebrate me, like celebrate that it's happening. That's celebrate that there's an institutional commitment in this space. If we can sort of mesh our goals of sort of research and teaching and experiential excellence with what true inclusion looks like, let's celebrate that. Celebrate the fact that we talk about it, every aspect and facet. If you are getting, for example, if you're getting a tour of this university, you will hear about, whether you want to or not, you will hear about the parts of the horseshoe that were built by individuals like yourself and myself 300 years ago, that received no pay for it, that were not free in this country, that were treated as chattel, the contributions of enslaved individuals. You will hear about, as a part of our true history of our university, we will talk about and openly reconcile and reckon with the fact that there were Black neighborhoods that were sort of torn asunder by the expansion of the University of South Carolina. And we will utilize that and sort of restore that, and also utilize that to make us better as well. So my hope is that we can sort of move forward in this space intentionally, that we do it in a way that is truly affirming to our students. I hear from more, one of the things that I've heard from our Black students particularly is that, I went 3 years without taking a class from a faculty member such as myself. Some of the studies that have come out in higher education, which sort of tell us what we already know, is that Black and brown students see the service workers, see themselves reflected in our service workers. And I'm not denigrating the service workers on our campus who provide an excellent role. But those shouldn't be the only Black and brown employees that our Latinx and Black students see. So if we can think about the University of South Carolina being a bastion for Black faculty and brown faculty and LGBTQ plus faculty and staff and students, that would be an accomplishment for us. And it won't come easy, but I do believe that it is possible through connection, through intentionality, and sort of through making sure that this is sort of interwoven into our values and our fabric.
No, well said, Julian. And I just want to first just say thank you. Specifically, this conversation has been very rewarding. I think also very fulfilling for all of us on the call as we get more of an in-depth and detailed vision in regards to where we're going, led by you, but obviously, done through the work of us. But one thing you said about the interview you had with President Caslin when you were sitting on the couch, you asked him if change is possible, at least at the University of South Carolina. And when you said that, it brings me back to our first Black president. I won't be the last, Barack Obama, right? Who once said that change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time, that we're the ones we've been waiting for, and we're the change that we see. It's very evident, not just through your words today, but also through your leadership, that Carolina has been waiting for you. The change that we wish to see will be done by us, but we are extremely thankful for your time, your labor, your energy, your effort, leading this charge forward, and leading a charge and setting a vision that we can all get behind and move in. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Tim. And I just wanted to thank everybody for participating, for being engaged. Just continue to stay engaged. I think that I just always implore folks to do that. Your claim, particularly our alum, your claims on this university are just as true as anybody else's. And I'm always telling our students that, because I think, for us as graduates or even current students at PWIs, we sometimes, I mean, it's baked into sort of the culture, is that, it doesn't always feel like this place belongs to us the same way that it belongs to other folks. And I'm telling our students that it actually absolutely does, and particularly for our alums, is claim your space, claim your, hold us accountable as a university, as leadership, for supporting the communities and the causes that matter to you. And then lastly, I look forward at any point in coming back, doing it again, following up if there's specific questions, or plans or things we want to walk through. We can certainly do that in whatever shape, format that looks like, Tim. So this has been fun.
Awesome, Julian. Awesome, Julian. For everyone else, again, please reach out to Julian if you all need anything, especially current students and alumni. Amber and Simone put in the chat the link to the Richard T. Greener Scholarship. So please consider giving to that scholarship if you're able. If you are not able to give to that scholarship, there are certainly a plethora of other ways that we can give back our time, our energy, our labor, to invest into our university and alma mater. But with that, thank you all again for a great program and a great evening. Julian, again, you're a Michigan man, I'm a Ohio State alum, but we're doing this work together.
Building bridges.
But we're getting Cox together. So
That's right.
I appreciate you, bro.
That's right, sir.
Everyone else have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.